The worst weapon in the game is definitely the trowel, and it's going to be in D tier. Now, the purpose of the trowel is to spawn a wall that actually deals spawn damage to enemies, and there are situations where it can work, but oftentimes it does not pay off, and enemies will just go through the wall and kill you. Not to mention, parrying is often better to do in these situations, as well as just escaping the enemies by dashing. The second worst weapon, which is actually just okay, is the bomb, and it's going into C tier. The bomb definitely has its fair share of combos it can perform, such as shooting it with the BB gun, but by itself, the bomb is just a weaker version of the rocket launcher that is harder to use properly. The third worst weapon, which I would actually argue is decent, is the wrench, and it is in B tier. The wrench overall is pretty versatile. It spawns a turret which can be healed with the wrench, and it can be useful to distract and kill enemies to heal some HP. Plus, the wrench can be used as a weapon. The main reason why it's low though is because the turret can easily be killed by a giant swarm of enemies, which happens pretty often in a run. Next up, we have the Super Ball. The Super Ball can be very effective against clearing out hordes of enemies, although you should keep some distance to allow splash damage to be effective. You can also use your sword to slash the ball forward, also dealing damage to multiple enemies. It's a solid weapon, but I do think there are better options. Coming up right next to its predecessor is the Cannonball. The Cannonball is the Super Ball, but it does higher damage to enemies, and it can be used in more combos such as shooting it with a BB gun, allowing it to be more effective against tanks. Like with the Super Ball, it's good, but there are better upgrades. Next up might be a bit controversial, but it's the multi-rocket launcher. The multi-rocket launcher shoots 7 rockets, but at the cost of having a higher cooldown than a normal rocket launcher. While this can be beneficial, its large radius often does not matter, as it can sometimes miss other enemies where the smaller missiles hit. Not to mention the normal rocket launcher and even the bazooka already have big enough explosions to kill a lot of enemies. Ending off the B tier is the paintball gun. The paintball gun serves its purpose as being a decent weapon similar to how a gun works in different video games. It does decent damage, being able to 2-shot noobs and 1-shot them if you get a headshot, as well as kill multiple enemies in a decent amount of shots. Of course, its damage is reduced against bosses, however. Overall, it's a decent starter weapon, but it is a weapon you'll want to upgrade later in the game. For the first A tier weapon, I'm going with the slingshot. I think the slingshot is overall better than the paintball gun because it is much more powerful in clearing out hordes from a short distance, and it has an ability where you can launch a 6-shot ball in the end and parry it with a sword to deal massive damage to enemies and one-shot some of them. That being said, like the paintball gun, the slingshot is a weapon that should be upgraded at the shop at either wave 10 or 15. Coming up next is the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher is one of the most balanced weapons in the game, being able to cause an explosion dealing high damage and allow splash damage, but it has a long cooldown. It's able to kill multiple enemies, deal decent damage to tanks, and you are able to perform rocket jumps. The rocket launcher is easily one of the most versatile weapons in the game that probably won't be upgraded in a run. Next up is the bazooka. While the rocket launcher is a very good and balanced weapon, the bazooka is a very good trade-off. The bazooka makes your explosions less powerful, but completely reworks the weapon. Instead of having a cooldown, you reload the bazooka, allowing it to have at most 4 rockets ready to launch. This is very good because it allows the rocket launcher to be used more like the paintball gun, and the damage decrease doesn't matter too much. Not the best upgrade, but definitely very versatile. Wrapping up the A tier is the Scatter Blaster. I was considering putting this weapon in S tier, but I do feel like there are much better weapons. Don't get me wrong, the Scatter Blaster is yet another great weapon in the game, being able to deal damage to multiple enemies with its balls, and you can parry the middle ball to shoot an explosion. While I do feel like there is a better version of this upgrade, I feel like there are some people who would prefer this upgrade. Definitely among the best weapons in the game is the Ninja Stars. The Ninja Stars may not be as useful as being used as a normal weapon, but it has an ability that can be incredibly useful against clearing out hordes and dealing high damage to tanks. It would have definitely been C tier if it wasn't for this ability, but overall, it deserves its spot in the S tier. I originally thought the BB gun should be lower, but it deserves its spot here on the tier list. The BB gun does around double the damage of the paintball gun, being able to kill enemies faster. It also has an ability where after you shoot enemies a certain amount of times, you can shoot a bullet that ricochets off an enemy that can hit other enemies, as well as being usable with the cannonball, both the ability and normal shots. Also, something I learned from someone, the higher the headshot combo you get, the more damage you do, which can be useful to defeat tanks, especially bosses, which have damage reduction. Overall, the BB gun is one of the best upgrades that you should definitely get if you got the paintball gun. Easily earning its spot in the S tier is the sword. The sword by far is the best normal weapon in the game because of its sheer versatility. Obviously you got using it to fight enemies, but also it is the only weapon in the game, along with its upgrades, that can be used to parry, which is an extremely useful feature against enemies and bosses, especially Jason, which you can absolutely destroy him with it. The only reason it's not an X tier is that the upgrades outclass it in every way, and there are many builds that do not have a sword, so it's not like it's an absolute requirement to beat the game, but it's still one of, if not the best weapons in the game. These next 3 weapons are an X tier, starting with the katana. The katana is a sword, but a little bit better because it can be used to parry much better because of its faster swings. It may not seem like a huge upgrade, but this makes parrying things like the Captain's projectiles and Megabon's flash, although you can't do Jason's because you can't get upgrades until Jason's defeated. But these overall allow the katana to be a lot more versatile, thus earning its spot in X tier. But the second best weapon in the game is the flamethrower. The flamethrower is basically the BB gun, but while it obviously has short range, its ability to do damage while giving a burning effect more than makes up for it. It is able to kill swarms and even certain tanks extremely fast, and even if it doesn't, the burning effect is definitely going to finish it off. Not to mention, like the Scatter Blaster, it also has a parryable object when you press E. It causes an explosion that automatically targets an enemy, which makes it very useful for fighting bosses at a distance, easily well deserving of this spot with how busted it is. Now, while every weapon has its purpose, the best weapon in my opinion is the Firebrand. It's debatable whether or not it's actually better than the katana or flamethrower, but in my opinion, its ability to set enemies on fire, as well as do massive damage, more than makes up for its slower swings. Besides, it's actually still possible to parry the slingshot pellet and flamethrower canister with it. If you swing a little bit earlier, you can still get the shot. It's also possible to parry the Scatter Blaster shot, but I don't have any footage of that because it's so hard to do. Overall, its superiority to the katana, as well as being similar to the flamethrower, makes this 100% worth buying every run. And that's the end of the tier list. Overall, I think most weapons in the game are pretty good and can be extremely versatile in their own right, and while this is my opinion, I do think this tier list is certainly up for debate. Feel free to share your ranking in the comments and have a good day.